all starting to enter the room at the moment. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. Hopefully you're all here. Okay, so just checking out a few things. If you have entered the room, please can you write where you have joined us from today in the chat. So the chat is located on your right-hand side. I can start with my location here. There we go. Thank you, Sarah Leaf. Nice to see you. Shelby. Wow, loads of people. Javier, Harmony, Dean, Naomi, Trevor. Great. We've got Manchester, Amsterdam, Canada, London, Amsterdam, Washington, Sacramento, Copenhagen, Panama City, New York City, Paris, France. Wow, what a global audience. Well, it's really great to be presenting to so many people across the globe, and it's a really important subject today. We're talking about designing for inclusivity. We're going to be doing a panel, and I'm going to let Alicia talk about that in a moment. But before we start, I wanted to introduce you to a bit about Tech Circus, what we do, what the panel is going to be about, and also some news about some of our partners. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is essentially how you use this platform. So you've already worked out how to do the chat, which is really important. Next to the chat, there's a little icon and it says like 2 little speech bubbles, it should be. And in there, you'll find questions where you can put your questions. Now, don't put your chat in there, but put your questions in there. Throughout today's panel, we will be asking you to ask questions, and the best questions go upvoted. And there's a little upvote thing here that you can do. And then those questions will go to the top. So if you've got questions for our panelists, put them in there, not in the chat room, in the Q&A room, and we will be able to ask those to the speakers and the panelists. The second thing I wanted to talk about was we have our actual chat where people are there, and we have a kind of a weird way of doing things because we're not in person. So instead of having a round of applause, what we would have is people hit the emojis. So could everyone hit the emojis and show us that you're here? Okay, that's like one person. Okay, that's it. Yeah, it's starting to go. There you go. So lots of emojis coming across. So if you like a comment, if you like what someone's saying, you agree with what they're saying, those emojis are a really good way to communicate with the speakers, you know, and to show them what's going on, especially at the end of the talk as well. So put your comments in the chat about the talks, your emojis on here, and then your questions in the Q&A. That's what you need to know about today's platform and how it's going to run. Do a brief overview of who we are. We're Tech Circus. Tech Circus runs a lot of different conferences. Somebody is trying out the raised hand button. You can do that, but usually that's for if you want to come on the stage. So I'd highly recommend not raising your hand unless you want your camera turned on. So Tech Circus do multiple events in different areas. We started off in the UX and product space, and that's what we're notoriously known for globally. But we also do events in Web3 and new emerging technologies. So a lot of creative people are into that area. We have all of our conferences and everything we do at techcircus.io. So you can check out techcircus.io, and that's where you can also see all of our free meetups like the one you're in today. So we've had a lot of people coming to our events, especially over the pandemic and online. Over 60,000 people have attended Tech Circus events. And now we're doing a lot of more in-person events. One of the things I wanted to point out to you is just how you can also follow us. So you can follow us on the Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the big one's the Discord community. We're going to be making a really big effort to create a Discord community that can carry on the conversation after we've had the chats. So it's for any of you gamers out there or people in Web3, you probably use Discord quite a lot, but it's a really great community platform, a bit like Slack. So if you want to go in there and start carrying on the conversation about designing for inclusivity, we can carry doing that for months onwards. Doesn't have to end here tonight. Okay, so the next thing is I want to just talk to you quickly about what tonight's event is. We're going to essentially doing this little introduction for me. I've got 3 minutes left, and that's 6:10 in the UK time where we're based. We'll be handing over to the panel discussion, which is going to be hosted by Alicia, and I'm going to let her talk about the speakers a bit later, who they are, and they can also do their own introductions. So that's a little bit about the panel, and the last thing I wanted to talk about was our partner, Zebra People. And Zebra People have been here supporting us for years, literally for years. And in the pandemic in particular, they were really helpful in supporting our online events. They took a leap of faith and helped us to really build up this online community. So we want to say a massive special thanks to Zebra People. And for those of you that don't know what Zebra People do, they're an amazing recruitment consultancy. They're very different from your typical recruiters. They specialize very, very heavily in the UX and product space. So if you've got any jobs, if you've got any needs that you're looking for a new role, or you just want to have a chat to them about maybe a passive thing where you're thinking about changing roles and you want to get some advice, reach out to Sam Gale. He's here tonight. There you go. In the chat, Sam Gale, thank you for being here for us. And yeah, so you can just reach straight out to them directly. There's going to be a video, I believe, popping up around this now, just to give you a bit more information about them.
London's leading digital product recruitment consultancy. We're proud to work with the smartest talent, best-loved brands, agencies, and startups. We're a team of experts recruiting for UX, design, tech, and product management. Honest, knowledgeable consultants with deep industry knowledge who actively listen to your requirements. Building long-term relationships with our clients and candidates is why we enjoy what we do and why we get 1/3 of our candidates and 2/3 of our clients through referrals. We have partnered with clients and candidates to identify skills and knowledge gaps. We have then delivered conferences, workshops, and training hosted by industry experts and events organisations just like Tech Circus. Head to zebrapeople.com to find out more about our open vacancies.
Amazing. So once again, thanks to Zebra People, true partner that have been with us for years. We've been around for 7 years and they've been sponsoring us for most of those and partnering with us. Okay, so that's enough about us and our partners. Now it's on to the actual panel itself. So I'm going to hand over to Alicia and she can give us a bit of an introduction to herself, and then we'll bring the panelists onto the stage. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, thanks for that, Luke. So hi, everyone. I'm Alicia. I am a director of research at a consulting company based in the UK. And I have nearly 20 years of experience in user experience research and service design, and working with global teams in industries such as startups, enterprise software, government, retail, manufacturing, and consulting. And I'm really excited to be hosting our panel here this evening. Inclusive design has been very important as a part of my career, especially as it relates to disability and the accessibility of products and services. And so now I'd like to introduce you to the rest of our panel. We'll start off with Josh. Josh, did you want to give a little bit of an introduction?
Sure, thank you, Alicia, and thanks for having me here, Luke and Tech Circus. My name is Josh Lamar. I'm the CEO of Amplinate. We are a research and design consultancy based in the USA, but we're actually kind of all over the world. We have people in Brazil, as well as Ireland and France and the USA, and soon to be some more people in the Philippines. I want to actually build the most diverse company possible. And I'm lucky enough that I actually co-own the company with my husband, Marcello. And we focus a lot on cross-cultural research, which is a part of inclusive design. But also we do a lot of research around the world in marginalized populations as well as disability.
Great, thanks for that, Josh. And next, I'd like to introduce you to Calvin Hall.
Hi, everybody. Also, I'm thrilled to be here. Let's see, pretty broad background. I grew up through the ranks of traditional graphic design school. I've been doing product design for close to 20 years, many different industries, digital marketing agencies, in-house. And I think my superpower right now is being a Swiss product army knife for founders and CEOs to execute their vision, since I've helped 3 startups get off the ground in the past 10 years. Currently, I'm director of product design, UI, UX for Humanity Health, which is a I'm very passionate about to have this position, because we're trying to change the hiring practices in this country regarding underrepresented groups and women. So we're all about DEI. And besides that bio script. I'm going to say something that I just want to say because society has allowed me to say it, as well as within my company, we can be fully expressed. So being brown, gay, and Swedish, I definitely have a point of view regarding being, DEI and inclusiveness. So it just feels really good to say that, and it tells me a lot of where I am in my own life.
All right, that's great. Thanks for that, Cal. And next we have Soren Hamby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Soren. I use they, them pronouns, and I head up our UX discipline at Benjamin Moore as the Senior Manager of UX and Digital Design. I also am starting up our accessibility program here and working accessibility into everything that we do across organization. Just like Cal, I've worked at a bunch of different places. I started as a graphic designer, traditional media, and worked into web design, and have worked with some agencies. I've worked in-house, places like the Department of Defense, and a bunch of different SaaS companies. Moving to e-commerce is really different. And I think it's really important because, transactions is one of the biggest things that people with disabilities face. It's one of the most inaccessible things. And as far as like my perspective, I'm a non-binary person. I also am autistic, and I have ADHD. I have several chronic illnesses and a visual disability. I actually have been previously legally blind and used a screen reader full time, and currently still am an occasional cane user. So I do think that there's a lot to be said for having people on your team that have disabilities or have the experience of being part of a marginalized group. So that, just to kick it off, there's already a tip for you from us.
Right, yes, we're getting started already. And last but not least, let's go ahead and introduce Isha, and we'll get into it here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isha. I'm incredibly humbled to be in such good company today. My background is in user experience research, and I work at Google as a product inclusion UX researcher. Similar to many of the folks here today, I kind of came to this through lived experiences. As a brown woman living frequently in environments that I was not part of the dominant culture, I kind of came to this space wanting to understand my own experience in the context of the world. But in doing this work, I began working in DEI and then later bringing those insights into the product development cycle. And I think what I really, truly appreciate is the opportunity to look beyond my own identity and understand that of others and other experiences, to really bring that focus to folks who are not me and not like me. So excited to be here today and to learn from this panel.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. And now you know a little bit more about us. So we'd like to take an opportunity to have you check the poll. So in the area on the right, you should see, it looks like a little bar chart. So this is a poll. So we would like you to tell us what role you are. Are you a designer? Are you a product owner, researcher, something else? That is really great to kind of understand where you're coming from, and maybe we'll be able to use this a little in our discussions today. As mentioned as well, Luke also was talking about the opportunity to post your questions and then upvote those during the session. Throughout the session today, we'll probably be checking those questions. So if somebody asks a really great question and you'd like us to be able to answer it during the time, get in there and upvote those questions so that we can address the ones that are really important for you today. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question of the evening is, what are we talking about when we say inclusive design? And Isha, why don't you get us started and tell us a little bit about what that means for you?
Absolutely, happy to. I think in answering this question, I really want to hit a couple important aspects of what inclusive design is. First of all, it's the practice of prioritizing and understanding the needs of historically excluded or marginalized groups or people throughout the entire process. And that's just the basic definition. I think digging in a little bit more, I think it's important to highlight that this isn't a checklist. This is not something we do just before launch, before something goes out the door. It is part of the entire process from start to finish to the iteration that happens. It's a mindset. We have to really bring this thought process with us in everything we do. And also, I think another aspect to highlight is by bringing the focus to folks who have come from historically marginalized or excluded identities, we actually end up serving the broader group of, I guess we call them users or people at large. There's many examples that folks can draw from. I have a close colleague who's an accessibility researcher, and she frequently talks about the example of curb cuts in the United States. These were implemented to serve folks in wheelchairs to allow them to access sidewalks easily. But in the end, we ended up serving a lot of different types of use cases, such as people pushing strollers, people pulling baggage, people temporarily in a wheelchair because of a broken leg. It's not just about bringing focus only to folks, it's about innovating better experiences by understanding the most vulnerable. And I'll pause there because I'm sure that my colleagues here on the panel have much more to add to this.
Yeah, I would love to tack on to that really quick. About the checklist part, I often get people that ask me, like, could you give me a quick one-pager checklist, like, so I can design inclusively? And I'm like, whoa, like, it's going to depend so much on what your product is, on what space you're in, on who your market is, who you're serving. And I think that's a really important thing to note, as a lot of people are really focused on numbers or compliance or, all of these other things. And it's really a process. It's not a checklist. And, continuous improvement is really hard to do, and it's hard to keep up. But that's something we have to do in a lot of other areas of expertise as well, like staying on top of the newest frameworks and technologies and updates to React or to HTML. It's always a shift in your process and your thinking, but it's a really important one to make. And I think one of the important parts of that is being able to interpret things that people are telling you and absorb them and not take it personally, and also to start learning where your biases might be so you can include people that can help point you in the right direction from the beginning when you start designing features and thinking from the discovery portion. So there's many books on cognitive bias that are out there that you can find that's a good fit for you, but I find that that's a really great place to start with a process rather than a checklist.
Yeah, Soren, let me just jump in. Thanks for making me smile, the whole checklist thing. Totally get that. And I think that's what people expect. I just want to add that, the design process, the market research, competitive market analysis, target audience, all that stuff. But if you have people around you that are actually representing those groups, it is so powerful because you have your built-in people for research right there and the usability, and just kind of trickles down from that.
I'd love to build on that too. That's totally important, because I think when I'm thinking about designing for inclusivity, I'm thinking about in groups and out groups. And whenever we have a dominant group that gets all of the attention, who is being unintentionally excluded from this design or from this research, it's so easy to just get a random sampling of people that happen to all be white somehow. But really, there's so many other dimensions that we can look at. And I think that as we're starting to look at groups and subgroups within a country can be really fascinating, and even between countries. One of my beliefs is that all international research, all cross-cultural research is inclusive, because especially in the US, we just focus on how it works in the US, and then we don't realize that people are so different. And as I've traveled and lived in France for the last 3 years, I just see again and again how important it is to understand these different perspectives. And to bring Calvin's point back too, it's really that the people that you have on your team are your biggest source of information about those other cultures. And this is a rich, we are all rich treasure troves of information and knowledge about our own experiences that may be different. And I had a corporate career. You can always look where I was at. But it was never really like, my gayness was never really something that was valued as a perspective. It was always about this other kind of like thing that was not as interesting. It was just like, oh yeah, it was just like, let's design for everybody. Everybody has to use this thing. We have to, it doesn't really matter if you're gay. But really, it changes the perspective, and every nuance that we can get from every different person is going to actually be so much more valuable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for your comments on that. And again, lots of smiles, lots of nodding heads. I'm seeing lots of comments coming in here of people, kind of in the same position. So it's great that everybody is trying to think about this and how we can, not only design inclusively, but also not unintentionally putting barriers in place, because I think that happens a lot because, again, we haven't just thought about some things in the beginning. So let's move on to our next question, which is, how do I practice inclusive design in my process? So let's get a little bit into the nitty gritty here. I think Calvin's going to start us off on this.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so I'm just very grateful for being in the company that I'm at right now. Again, we are trying to change the hiring practices in this country. And the most common obstacle towards hiring underrepresented groups, I believe it was the CEO of Wells Fargo who got a lot of heat from this a couple of years ago. He said, we can't find Black talent or qualified Black talent. And it's because if you're a middle-aged white man and your entire you look at your network of LinkedIn, that's what that is. So you have to really start challenging yourself a little bit more. Again, back to people, the CEO of my company, I was employee number 5. We're now 25 people in 6 months. Just getting on Zoom calls and seeing the range of skin tones and genders is just so amazing to me. So we have really those people in place to represent and to have a unique point of view around things. When we build in our design process, of course, we take things into consideration, accessibility, ADA compliancy, and all that stuff too. But I think what's really served us very well. Okay, I mentioned I helped build many startups, and people who work in startups, you have a hypothesis, you have an assumption, and most of the time you can just run with it without really doing any research. There, I said it right. Our CEO has a background in building hiring platforms such as LinkedIn, not LinkedIn per se, but something like LinkedIn. So I trust his knowledge. I trust the people he put in place. But really, what changed the game for me and the way we approached building product is that we invited 100 founding members, which are close friends of underrepresented groups and women, from the CEO. And I actually had access to this unique niche group of people who were 45 to 65, C-level, highly educated, 2 or more PhDs, if not 3, and very, very self-accomplished and motivated. And so I took advantage of this founding member group of 100, and I was able to conduct user research, like 1 to 2 hour interviews with these people. Yeah, it took some time, but the things that we uncovered, which builds upon building a great inclusive product or process, is understanding their pain points, their barriers, and putting your ego aside and trying to be as unbiased as you can to really be as empathetic as you can. And it just blew me away of what was uncovered. Underrepresented groups live constantly with microaggressions, right? It could be, even sexual harassment for different types of genders and stuff like that. So we also realized that these people had such a large degree of distrust for other processes or products or people because there have been barriers and ceilings that have been placed in front of them once they've reached a certain level. So, there's code switching that's always involved as well. So to me, there were often times where I got off those calls and I was very emotional because I did not know that. So that actually helped me grow as a person and become a better product person on top of that. And I think primarily, we didn't have a marketing department when we first started. We've since rounded out all those different disciplines. But it's really important to have your language and your voice and tone very on target for that type of audience to help them be aspirational and to have them trust you. And so those are some of the types of things that we leverage on a day-to-day basis to facilitate our inclusive design process.
I'm happy to chime in a little bit here. A lot of my work has been around processes so far. I think first of all, Calvin, thank you for starting us off with the very important note of who's on your team. That's an incredibly important way to kind of get this started. I think when you're looking at the actual product design process, there's a few opportunities along the way. You also mentioned, Calvin, research. As a researcher, my answer will likely be a little bit biased, but I would start with foundational research. When you're ideating, the insights that you're basing your ideation upon. I mean, sometimes maybe you're not doing foundational research, but you're basing it upon experiences or things you've learned. That also has a lens of bias involved, right? Because you're relying on your own experiences from a certain lens. But in whichever way that you do foundational research, at that stage, it's important to bring focus to historically marginalized communities. And there's a number of ways to do this. You don't have to get on the phone and talk to people necessarily. There's lots of existing literature out there that you can reference. There are statistics you can look at, insights from previous studies. You can do analysis before you even begin doing primary research, which is a great opportunity to at least get yourself up to scratch a little bit before asking people to relive their own traumas for the sake of your particular goal. So that's one. Then the second thing I would say is, as you're designing and iterating, sometimes we'll do lean UX where, I'll ask a couple people to try out my feature and then I'll iterate quickly and get it to a point where it works. But in that process, you have to continue engaging with people from historically marginalized identities, because sometimes we hear something, and this happens with researchers all the time. I'll present a report and the PM will walk away being like, okay, this is the idea I have. And I'm like, wait, come back. That's not what I meant to tell you. And so that level of interpretation happens to all of us. We maybe walk away with an understanding, but we have to check that understanding. And we have to include these voices along the way that we are iterating and building our product. And then we look at, when we launch, we have evaluation and metrics that we use to assess, was this successful? At that point, we have to ask, okay, who's giving us the feedback of success? Well, even when we say users, are we assuming that the people that we are trying to serve are even our users? Should we be looking beyond people who already use our product? And then also, what are the metrics we're using? Are we looking at volume, for example? When someone is part of a minority, you might not be capturing them in volume, but the impact on them is high in severity. So thinking about whether the metrics you use are actually inclusive is another step to take. And then finally, at the end, I would say the fourth part is, we identify problems. We see, okay, this is impacting a certain group of people, but then we have all these other issues also to solve. We have a V2, we have shiny new features to launch. When we're prioritizing fixing those problems, do we again prioritize the issues and needs of the folks that have already come out and said, hey, like I haven't been represented, but I'm having this issue. Prioritization is also that fourth and important step that I would speak to.
Yeah, Isha, thank you for that. I just want to just add a couple of sentences. You mentioned prioritization. Absolutely. Like, being inclusive or trying to design an inclusive process or provide value to a certain inclusive audience, right? You can't solve everything all at once. And we have a motto within our company that, we're not trying to boil the ocean right now. So we're taking a couple of chunks. We might go after LGBT afterwards, but we understand the framework of what we're trying to do within a certain amount of time, and then we'll take it from there.
Just one other thought, just being another researcher on the panel, I really appreciate your process, Isha. Um, and one of the things that I think, just as a way of being a researcher and how we're recruiting for projects, one of the things that we started doing is just always having the most diverse recruit that we possibly can. And of course, always within the subset of like target audience for the product, but at the same time, just intentionally going after trying to make sure that we're getting a really wide breadth of diversity in all of the recruits that we work on is just a simple, easy thing to do. I've even heard stories of some companies even eliminating white people and just doing research with minorities for the whole period of time that they're doing research on a product. These are very easy ways to just really pick up and listen to these stories and hear what's different more so, because it's really difficult to pick up on like the one minority person that you have in your study of 10. It's like, oh yeah, there's one person said something slightly different. And then you get the person that's like, oh yeah, well, that was only one person. Yeah, but that person's experience was really bad. And we have to account for that. When you like take out all of the white people and say, okay, well, look, we have all minorities here, and look at all these commonalities that have come out of it that we wouldn't have heard from the dominant audience.
Yeah, Josh, that's a really good point that, you know, we have a problem sometimes in UX that some of us have come from a design background and not a statistics background. So we have some problems if we haven't done the work ourselves of learning about statistical significance and sample sizes and sample sets. If we haven't done that ourselves, then nobody has like a curriculum or a handbook or anything that says this is the right way to do it. And it does kind of lead to some people do it one way and some people do it another way. And some people think that, you know, 10 users is enough and we'll throw any outliers out. You're absolutely right. So that's one thing that I think I could talk about for a long time is statistics on this. But I just wanted to say also just thinking about the design of your research is really important. And even just like how you do design thinking and including people at that point before you even get to thinking about what features you want to test. Just the whole service journey of mapping that out is really, really important. I've worked on a product that I can't talk a lot about, but I came in as an expert on visual disabilities, and we uncovered so many things that was really interesting that they didn't know about, like how people navigate and take directions if they are using a cane, or you know, like the fact that service animals like guide dogs have to sit in front of them, so the seat has to be able to move forward if they're sitting in the back of a ride share. So there was just like all of these different things that they didn't really consider, like, hey, if you're going to do user testing, you have to have a place in that's, you know, in the middle of the city that they can get to, that has a place for animals to relieve themselves and to be able to get water and lay down while you're doing the interview and everything. So there's just like a lot of places where if you include people in the design of the research for the people that are marginalized as well, that you're paying to do this, then it really ends up being a lot better experience for even just the marginalized people that you're including in the design process. And you know, like, you know, we're talking about like not having people relive their trauma. Sometimes making it a good experience to work with you on the experience is a gift into itself. Like just saying like, hey, we really do care about this, we want to get it right, so we paid somebody to get it right, and then we're going to make this product right for you.
It's actually leading into it's actually leading nicely to our next question. One thing I just want to chime in, bringing up some really great examples around, you know, thinking as a designer or thinking as a researcher. One thing that's incredibly important that we should talk about is data protection. So, we are asking people sometimes to describe very personal experiences that, again, may be traumatic or may be difficult. And one thing I, as a researcher, see all the time is people inadvertently sharing participant names and things like presentations or reports. So definitely make sure you're brushing up on your data protection as well, because we are trying to design products and we want to make sure that we're being, I information think about as well, making sure we're following our data protection standards with that. So yeah, let's just jump into the next question then. Josh, tell us a little bit more about this. How do I work with people if I don't have that lived experience? How do I design something that maybe I don't have that personal experience of?
This is such a great question and something that I'm very, very passionate about. And as probably some of you figured out, I am not French. I am American, but I've lived in France for the last 3 years. And I've also been doing international research, and then created a company to start doing international research specifically because I absolutely just love traveling. I love cultures. I love people. I love learning about new people and hearing their stories and having people share their lived experiences. And I am just very, very passionate about this. And the answer is you cannot start designing without asking someone about their experience. And so it's really important to bring people in throughout the entire process. And there's a phrase, nothing about us without us. And I just love this phrase so much because it can apply to any group that you're looking at. And it just means that you involve that group in the process, that marginalized group, that subgroup, that other culture, whoever that is that you want to really design for. And you should be designing for people that are beyond just the initial market that you're working on anyway. And so start with that. Start with talking to people that are from that group. Maybe you have an office in another country that you're trying to design for. Maybe talk to that person. Maybe there's a group or an employee resource group where you can reach out and find someone that's comfortable sharing their experience with your product as well. Start with internal to your company. Who fits that demographic, and how can you reach out to them and learn more about that experience. Next, you want to really check your biases. And it's again, cognitive biases are very difficult to pay attention to, but whenever we are having any kind of really strong emotional response can be positive or negative, but whenever we have a really strong emotional response, it's an indicator to ourselves that something's going on there, because we don't necessarily know how we're seeing the world, but we do realize that over time we see the world through our own lenses, and those lenses can get kind of dirty sometimes, and we see things through this own view. And so when someone is sharing their story, it's not about criticizing how good or bad their way of doing something is. It's about being open, and it's about really letting them share who they are and what they care about and how it works for them. Our job as researchers is never to judge, but just to understand. And whenever we make these assumptions about who a person is or what they think or what they care about or what matters to them, we're going to be wrong. And I think this is the most beautiful part about research and talking to other humans, is that when you allow yourself to be surprised, you will be, because you find what you look for. And if you look for a person, another human that is having an experience, and you have compassion for that person, even if you can't ever truly empathize, like I cannot empathize with the experience of being a woman, but I can have compassion for the lived experience of women, of any of these other groups, and that compassion allows me to make decisions, and allows me to make decisions about the product and how to make it better and more inclusive.
Josh, you're hitting a lot of points that I really like to talk about a lot. I give a talk about camera lenses and how, when you're taking a photo of something, the lenses that you're looking through also obstruct you from seeing other things around you. So you could be at the same location as someone taking a picture of a lake. You could have a completely different view than someone that's also at that same location, because you have different lenses that show like different depths of field. And it's really, really interesting that you have a very similar kind of metaphor for that. So, and I also put nothing for us without us in our company accessibility guidelines. So, big fan. And I would just add on that, you know, designing is not always ubiquitous. You know, people are really, really fond of universal design. But when you think of things that by nature could be very exclusive, like I would say that Clubhouse is a really great example. It's audio only. So the whole point of Clubhouse, the app, was to join an audio room and just have audio only, basically the same thing as this, but no video. And have speakers come up. You could raise your hand. I think it's a good idea, but you would never really be able to make that accessible for everyone, just because of the nature of the platform. Being able to make that accessible for people that are hard of hearing or deaf would be extremely hard. So some experiences it's really, really hard to make accessible for everybody. And then I would just say like personalization comes up a lot for me, because when you think about visual disabilities, there's a whole spectrum of visual disabilities. You know, like I have complete blindness in one eye and I have partial sight in another eye. And it's also like light dependent and like pressure dependent. So my sight has changed over the course of 2 years. And people don't really think about the fact that, you know, like there isn't a right way to set up like an interface for someone with a visual disability. It's really about doing what's right for that person that makes it easiest for them. Just like being able to customize the font on an Android phone makes it a lot easier for some people with dyslexia to read things better, or people with other cognitive disabilities. It makes things harder to read in Comic Sans, but for some people with dyslexia, it makes it so much easier. So it's really, I think, about personalization and finding those areas where you can let things like an OS control that personalization, and areas where you can surface those ideas for the user. So I just wanted to say that with design, it's hard to account for all those things, but when you can, it's really good to let people let you know what that is, and let them make their own decisions.
Yeah, I just want to add real quickly to you know, the whole lens metaphor that we're using. I think if you understand that there are different lenses, first of all, you acknowledge that, right, and you can really grow and thrive from being from learning more about that. My lens in particular would have come as a disadvantage to me in this country with the company I'm working for. I'm brown, but my hometown is Stockholm. I have no experience of the Black experience or the underrepresented groups experience in this country. And that has really challenged me and made me grow a lot more as a human being. And that's just something, you know, that was my blind spot, even though I'm brown. So those challenges exist as well.
That's a really fantastic point. Thank you for all of the comments here. We're just looking at the time and thinking, oh my goodness, I think we could talk about this forever. We've got such great feedback coming in from everyone. But I do want to move on to our next question. Looking back to our poll, actually, we did have 54% of you are telling us you're designers, followed by 19% as researchers. So that's exciting. With the next question, I want to add another poll question for you. Someone has posted in the Q&A, but also one of the things that we wanted to talk about is really understanding how well you think your company is currently doing around inclusive design. And Seren, if you could take us really kind of through, how do you get buy-in from your organization for inclusive design? Where do you start for this?
This is a great question, and I really love it. I think this requires you knowing your organization a little bit and then speaking to their values and having done a little research on the different models that exist in these different marginalized communities. So For example, in the disability community, there's the social model of disability where, you know, it's about removing barriers. It's not about like, you know, curing disabilities. The medical model is about curing disabilities. There's several other models like the productivity model. The legal model would be compliance. The moral model is like, it's very archaic, but you know, where people think you're kind of like being punished in some way for a moral failing by having a disability. You know, there's all these different models that exist within, and knowing how to speak to those and like either tailor those to your company values or even to the particular stakeholder that you're talking to. If I talk to somebody who's a believe in the right thing kind of person, like I want to apply by these company tenets and we're a community kind of organization, and I start talking to them about compliance, they're going to be like, ah, womp womp, like no, no, thank you. But if I talk to somebody that's focused on gaining new customers and I talk to them about doing the right thing, they're going to be like, you could have told me about that 20% of people that I'm going to gain by making my product accessible. Like that's a great argument to make to somebody who's focused on growth. So it's really about just knowing your audience in that instance, to get that buy-in. Of course, we all here care about it and know it's the right thing to do, but there are all these models that you can use to prove that ROI.
Yeah, I want to jump in a little bit too. I mean, I totally agree with Soren said. And I think for many years, it's been hard to, you know, you can never go wrong with metrics, right? But with something so abstract as DEI or your users, or do we have the right users, or where do we find them? It's been hard, but you know, plenty of studies out there now, and these numbers range, but the profitability of a company increases anywhere from 19 to 35% with a very strong, diverse and inclusive culture within a company. So, you know, here you go. There you go.
And just from the user end of things, like I've been doing usability studies and research with people for so many, like 18 years now. And people don't use things that are bad. And people don't use things that don't work or that like turn them off or make them feel excluded. And the simple business answer is like every product wants more users. And if your product is unintentionally excluding people, like that's a problem because you're literally leaving money on the table of people that could be paying for your product. And it's just super simple, like get as many people to use it as you can because you're solving a problem that people have in a way that's better than your competitors. That's the business case of like everything, every product out there. And as soon as you can start tying into that and growing the audience, you're going to be able to make the business case. Also, I didn't understand all of this until I started a business, so it helps to have that perspective. But I wish I told myself this, like, you know, from the Josh from 18 years ago.
I might just add, oh, you know what, Alicia, no, it's okay. I think that the answers have been really thorough, so I don't have to add anything. We're short on time.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add, I think Soren's answer initially was so thorough, and everyone who has added on, but the two things I would say are, first of all, you don't necessarily have to convince people at the outset. Sometimes you can just kind of do something and then show the results of it. If you're a researcher, go ahead and like do your research with certain people. Like if they're not collecting identity, then don't collect it and just make sure that you have certain people you focused on in your studies. If you're a designer, do your work with a focus on historically marginalized groups. You don't need permission to do things inclusively. So that's one part that I just want to add. Don't ask for permission, just show them it works. And the other part I would add to is that it's a lot harder to get someone's trust back once you've broken that trust. If they've used your product and it didn't work for them and they're like, hey, this product doesn't work for people like me, it's going to be a lot harder to say, wait, come back, I fixed it for you, than it is to just launch with something that works for everybody. So from that perspective, think about that angle as well.
Yes, absolutely. That is such a really great point. Trust is huge in what we're trying to do here, whatever we're building, products or services. So, yeah, thank you for ending on that point. I'm looking at our poll here, and it looks like 42% of you rate your company as three, 28% of you are rating your company as two, 13% rating your company as one, and not doing so well with inclusive design. So, Josh, can you tell us about some resources? Where can I go to learn more about resources for inclusive design?
Yeah, I co-wrote a paper on inclusive design, and Carrot has pinned it to the top of the chat screen. So if you haven't already downloaded it, please go ahead and download that. There's a ton of resources at the end. It was intended as a really thorough lit review of all of the ideas that are out there right now. There are individual articles and videos, but there are also sites that have places that you can go and dig in and learn more as well on any and all of these topics. So if you find it valuable, please let me know. I'd love to hear. And if you have feedback on it, I'd also love to hear that as well, because this is just a V1, and this is a topic that continues to grow and evolve, but we want to really share as much as we can about what we've learned, because it's impacted how we do research as well.
Yeah, and again, I mean, there's lots of really great resources out there. We might be able to, I know several people have shared their LinkedIn, follow some of your speakers on LinkedIn. I know I post about a lot of accessibility and inclusion stuff all the time. I'm sure my fellow panelists do as well. Lots of great books and resources. Seren, you came off mute. Did you have something that you wanted to add?
I did. I was trying to think of how to form this in my mind before I came off mute, and I didn't want to take the space from someone else. But I really think that it's super important to follow people from the different groups that you're wanting to get better in servicing. For instance, like, I know I don't have any perspective on what it's like to be an English as an additional language speaker because I only speak English. I am not a person of color. I don't have the experience of like all these different experiences that there's things that had never occurred to me and I didn't have exposure to. And so it's work for me to put myself in that mindset or to consider. And so it gets easier if you follow people that are doing the like DE and I work in that and are marginalized people in that space. So if you only follow like white people that are doing DEI work, or like white men, especially that white cis het men that are doing accessibility, it's really really hard to get the full picture, especially when intersections happen, because there's like a lot of things that I would say like Black non-binary trans women have to go through, especially like disabled non-binary trans women, that just don't happen to someone like me. It's just a different thing, like and like their encounters are completely different. So there's just another layer of things to consider sometimes when you're thinking about who you want to follow and what resources you want to use, or even if you're thinking about consulting. I've just noticed a big trend that some companies tend to hire like a firm that is pretty much just staffed by white people or cisgender people. And if you want to get the full picture, make sure you're hiring diversely, even if it's just a vendor.
Yeah, I'd like that. Go ahead, Isa.
Oh, I was just going to say, hack your feeds. A lot of this work is around empathy and empathy building, and sometimes our closest circle of empathy and it comes from the people around us and the consumption that we engage in. So like if you take an active look at some of your passive consumption, your like social media news feeds, your sources of news, the books you're reading, there's a lot of ways to just kind of, like Soren said, start following people who are different from you, who are from these communities. Start adding in a new book every once in a while, like between your fictional reads, maybe read something that's by an author that's not the same as everything else you're consuming. Maybe start watching shows and TV that are different from what you usually consume. we as humans, like there's a lot going on in everyone's life. Sometimes this work is heavy, but it can also be lightweight and passive if we program our processes, even in our life, to be that way.
Yeah, I like that though. How'd you phrase it? Circle of empathy. I love that. So I think what's really worked for me, and I think is a little underestimated, or maybe we just haven't spoken about it, is mentorship and in sponsorship. I've realized, it just dawned upon me working for this company where I can be fully expressed. It's like, wait a minute, I have 20 years of experience in this business, right? Let me help out a junior designer or something. So I actually reached out to Rutgers University, which I didn't know at the time, and I'm very happy it turned out this way, but they're one of the most diverse universities in the country. And I'm actually now sponsoring over the summer 40 different university students from all different walks of life, well, not different walks of life, but they're underrepresented groups. And it just feels fantastic having that interaction. And I am just learning so much from them. And they're making my product knowledge a lot stronger.
One other thing I want to build on Soren's comment too is just we haven't all said it exactly this way, but I want to say it really strongly. It is everyone's responsibility to fill in their gaps of knowledge. And you might have a friend that's Black, and maybe you can talk to them about their experience, but maybe your Black coworker doesn't want to talk about it all the time. I'll use myself as an example. It's Gay Pride Month. Do I want to be an exemplar for the queer community for the entire month? No. And it gets exhausting to talk about. And at the same time, for my close friends or for people that are really approaching with curiosity and want to learn, like I want to share my experience, but I'm not speaking for my entire group. And that's a thing that like we need to celebrate all of the different groups. And we also need to take the responsibility to fill in our gaps of knowledge as well.
I just want to say thank you for saying that. And to everyone, it is not the responsibility of an underrepresented person to tell you how to think or feel about something. That is probably one of the most, at least for the demographics that we have, underrepresented Black, Asian, Latino, Lusophone, and women. That is probably one of the biggest insults you can do, because that just shows a very, it shows a huge blind spot, obviously, which we all have, but it shows a lack of caring, compassion, and empathy of taking responsibility for your view of the world.
Yeah, I just wanted to real quick say that we've had like a lot of things happen where there's social media posts about it, and somebody will say, well, hello, underrepresented person, can you give me some resources on that? And that makes more work, even just to give a resource or a list of resources that's appropriate for that situation. So instead of just like listening and saying, okay, I've seen a social media post, like Cal has posted and said, like, there's a problem, Black people are being treated this way. I'm going to go Google it. I'm going to go find a book. I'm going to go do it myself. They're like, it just seems like a little disingenuous sometimes to be like, well, I want to get the right resource. Can you give me the right resource? Because then you're expecting them to go read about their own oppression as well to make sure it's the right resource for you. It's just, it's a lot. So I know that it seems like a lot of work sometimes, but, just start by maybe just like some bias training so you can, like I know I started with that, but some bias training just to start breaking those down in your mind, just eliminating those tricky patterns from the website, things like that. And then start getting into the more heavy stuff and expanding your empathy circle, all of that. It doesn't have to be all at once. Just like accessibility is not a one-day journey. It's not an overnight fix. You don't just like wake up and it's an accessible website and it's accessible forever. You then have to work it in every single day. So this is just a different way of moving about the world.
May I say one thing that I think we've all been alluding to, but maybe haven't overtly said? All these amazing points. I think two things are important. One is this work requires a strong knowledge of ethics in this space. And please don't go out there and start asking people questions without thinking about the impact you're going to have on them, just overall. And then the second aspect is it also involves being aware of your own privilege and the privilege of the field folks you talk to. Because chances are, if you are working in a certain place, if you have a certain education, if you have a certain income, you have privilege. If you have certain abilities, if you have a certain identity, whatever it may be, we all have some level of privilege. And the more we can kind of identify our own privilege, that helps us to identify our blind spots. And I think that that is an important part of the work we do as well, because I mean, with international research, for example, I know some people frequently like to go to India. I'm an Indian woman, so I've frequently talked to people doing Indian research, and they go to Bombay and they do research with college students and say, "This is what I've learned about India." And I can tell you that's not where you're going to learn about the diversity of India. That is one perspective, but every country has its own systems of oppression, it has its own geographies, identities, diversities. And when we go and do research in these contexts, we have to understand all that complexity before we say that we understand the country itself.
I love that. I'm also realizing, we've talked about, expanding our knowledge and building on that. And, like Soren said, it's an organic, ever evolving kind of process, right? But I would also encourage, once you reach a certain level of comfortability with it, become an ally. That will also help you gain more knowledge, as opposed to just asking people directly from their point of view. You will actually see things a lot differently.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. We are actually over time now. I think, like we said, we could carry on talking about this topic for hours. I think all of us are so incredibly passionate and interested in this. I did just want to shout out, there's a few questions in the Q&A area. Some really fantastic questions that we are just kind of running out of time and not going to possibly be able to get to, but we've got one here from Imran asking, how do you deconstruct a lot of the terminology in tech, which is harmful and from a position of privilege, such as people being hard to reach or a product being a minimum viable product? How do we get away from that? Christina's asked a great question around how do we get businesses to prioritize the marginalized voices? So that was something that I believe that Isha was talking about earlier, maybe just do things and ask for what is the expression, ask for forgiveness instead of permission. I think maybe is one way that we could look at that. We got some questions around how your own employee experiences are, and how that your company deals with UX. And on the topic of evolving needs, what do adaptable products look like to you, or what does that design process entail for you? Luke, I'm going to hand it over to you. Maybe there's a way that we can try and answer some of these questions offline and share with our audience, just so that we can continue to be respectful of people's time. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists. I think everyone has hopefully found this session as engaging and thoughtful and educational as I have. So thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Luke, I'll hand it back to you.
This has been one of the best panels I've ever seen at UX Crunch. It's absolutely fantastic. I was engaged the whole way through and I just couldn't stop listening. And we do a lot of these. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes, we do the panels and I sit there and have a cup of coffee and check Facebook or something in between. I couldn't keep my eyes off that the whole time. It was absolutely unreal. And I know that all the audience felt the same. I've never seen so much engagement in the chats and questions and stuff. So it was a great job. And I want to say thanks to the speakers. Thanks to Alicia for doing such a great job at hosting. I know that the chats went on for a while, but they were really, really good. So it was really worth it. How are we going to do this again? Because we've got so much more to talk about. I don't know what you think. Should we do another event and just do part 2 with the same panelists? With the audience like that? Because we've got so many questions to do. We could keep the questions that we've got in the Q&A. And yeah, look, the audience absolutely want that. So let's do it. Let's organize Designing for Inclusivity part 2. It will be exactly the same panelists because they've all been amazing, same host. As long as everybody's okay with that and you're happy to come back, I'll be more than happy to put it back on again. I think that everybody here really wants to hear more. So thank you so much for everything today. Before we leave, I just wanted to let everybody know about our next conference. Our next conference is called Business and Design. We're going to be hosting that in London and online. And if you're a senior leader or somebody that wants to learn a bit more about how the business like correlates with design, that's a really useful conference. We've got conferences throughout the year. So yeah, we've got amazing feedback coming through here. I've never seen anything like it on a meetup. So we'll definitely come back to do this again. And thank you all again once for attending. If you like the speakers, also do tweet about this. Let people know about it on LinkedIn. Tag people. I'm more than happy to tag Tech Circus and the US Crunch, and I'm sure the speakers will be happy to talk to you and engage on LinkedIn. We've got the Discord channel if you want to chat in there a little bit more about it. I know that's quite tricky to get everybody from the group to talk together all at once. So let's come back and do this all again. Okay, that's everything from us. Thank you and goodbye. Is there any last thoughts from the speakers? Anything you want to add? Maybe one last point before we go?
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I just want to say thank you to the other speakers. It was so great to get to know you and your point of view a little bit better too. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Second that. And also good luck on your journeys, because our journeys are all beginning and we're all going to be in different places. And as we go, we're going to learn more and we're going to make the world better.
Yes, I echo that. Start now. You're already starting. You've attended this session. You're already doing the work. So keep at it, keep learning, and keep asking questions.
Cool. Okay, so thank you once again, everybody, in particular to Alicia for hosting such a great session for us today. And we will see you next time. We'll work out a time. We'll be posting it back on techcircus.io if you want to check out our website. We've got other events there about UX writing and stuff coming up as well. But we'll do this one again in a month or two's time when everybody's available. And we'll be posting it and sharing it with everybody who signed up for this. We'll send it to your emails to let you know when it's back on again. Okay, everyone, thank you and good night and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.